Hey everyone, welcome to the Giving Town podcast, brought to you by the Joyful Roberts Group, where we help your family make the right move. I'm your host, Daniel Roberts, and today I'm going to be sharing my recent conversation with Newberg's Mayor, Bill Rosacker, and City Manager, Will Worthey. The topic is the state of the city, and we'll be covering topics ranging from the roles of mayor and city manager, how the city government works, what's changed over the past several years, and what you as a Newberg resident should know about. We're also going to be covering topics about housing, the new Collina building project, traffic light cameras, city finances, the old mill site, the riverfront master plan, River Street, and quite a bit more. This is a super packed and informative episode that honestly every Newberg resident needs to listen to. So let's go ahead and jump right in. Will, Bill, it's great to have both of you here, and this is the first one I think we've done with both of you. I know both of you individually have been on the podcast before, but it's great to have both of you here and sharing for our community what's happening in the city, just some updates that have happened over the past year, over the past several years, and looking forward to having both of you share. So thanks for being here today.
Thanks for having us.
Cheers.
So the first thing is some people who, maybe they're new to the city or they've just never heard or just don't know all the details, may not understand completely the roles of a city manager and the role of a mayor. And sometimes those different responsibilities get switched in people's minds or they just don't know. So could you take in turn, maybe Will, you start first and then Bill share, what is your role? So Will, as a city manager, what do you actually do?
So the first of all, it can be thought of as sort of the chief executive for the staff of the city, if you want to put it to a company perspective. So the supervision, the direction and working closely with all of the department heads, that would be people like the planning director, the police chief, stuff like that. And then in the wider sense, the city manager has the role of receiving the strategic direction from the council, what they want the staff to work on, what the council's goals are, and trying to develop policy or procedures or hiring to get to those objectives.
So in a sense, the city or the Newberg's City Council is kind of like a board of directors. Yeah. And then you're kind of like the CEO. Is that a fair way to put it?
That's a good analogy, yes.
Okay. And so, and I'll switch to you, Bill, and I'll come back. But so as the Newberg's mayor, what is the actual role and responsibilities of the mayor?
Well, the only responsibility that the mayor has is, that's unique, is the responsibility to run the city council meetings. Other than that, I'm just a city councilor, one of 7. And as you stated before, we can be perceived as the board of directors for the corporation of the city of Newberg. And Will, of course, is the man that is hired by us to operate the city.
So in a sense, if we were using that board of directors analogy, you would essentially be like the chair of the board. Is that
correct?
A way to put it? Okay. So some people might think that as a mayor, and actually, I don't even know if it's like this in other cities, but you don't actually have any unilateral authority to just make a decision and this is what's happening, do you? Or does it have to be a decision made by the council as a whole?
Yeah, no, I'm one of 7. My job is to round the troops and get things done.
Okay. So as the mayor, though, you kind of become, in a sense, the face of Newberg, right? Because it's an elected, all the council positions are elected, but the mayor is viewed as a very kind of different or special position. But really, it sounds like it's not a whole lot different than just being another council member. Is that
yeah,
true?
That's, I have a superpower now, and that's that I can call almost anybody in town and they'll take my phone call. So it's not an official position, but it works that way.
Yeah.
To continue the analogy of the board of directors, the city council, just like the board of directors, we represent the stockholders. We represent the citizens, the residents of Newberg, where the Will and the rest of the staff represents the corporation of Newberg.
Okay. No, that's helpful just as we talk and develop a framework for how the city works. And maybe that's a good direction to take now, is just how do things get done? So how do you go from the city council is they're making their decisions, and how do those kind of get formulated, and how do things actually happen? So go ahead.
Will's got a quick civic lesson to go.
Yes. This is so. I think I would say this. So this is an important thing that is a key part of the mayor's role, is that in being the chair of that board, he sets the stage for the agenda, which will be the items that will be debated in the council chamber. So in order to know the will of council, as we say, we have to have an agenda, and the agenda will have items on it, and they could be items from the general public, they could be from departments, even from other agencies. And as they come in, it's one of Bill's important roles is to make sure that things are heard properly and in a timely way, so that those strategic decisions can be made.
Okay. So
there's one more way that things can come to the agenda, and that's the city council themselves. The two of them want to have an item on the agenda that I don't agree with, they can force me to put it on.
Okay. So any two have an item, they can, okay. So your role really is deciding what is going to be talked about in city council meetings. Is that
correct?
Right.
And run an orderly meeting.
Okay.
To facilitate.
So from your perspective, Will, as a city manager, and has it been since 2021? Is this year 5 for you?
Yes.
Wow. This doesn't feel like that long ago to me.
It's kind of record-breaking for Newberg.
Yeah, wow. Yeah, I don't know the last time we've had a city manager for 5 years. And maybe we can get into some of that in a little bit for people who don't know. But
pretty sure you'd have to go back to Dwayne Cole to get to that.
So from your perspective, because you've had 2 mayors you've been under, and what is the difference? I mean, obviously different mayors can have different things they want to talk about. They have different ideologies. What are things that you've seen that makes a mayor effective? Because actually I don't want to get political necessarily.
No, and I'm not going to get political. No, I guess I would probably say I didn't know what I didn't know in the first year. So I didn't know that perhaps some of the processes were not as orderly as the ones that the current council has put in place. So the mechanisms of governance, how we do council rules, have been revised a couple of times in the last 4 years. And a couple of the enhancements that represent changes and improvements, in my opinion, include we now have to have the council packet published guaranteed 7 days before the meeting to allow that board to review the packet thoroughly so they can make informed decisions. And then another thing that we've done is very clearly we've added procedurally the fact that we now have to have executive summaries for documents that have 100 pages or more. We also have a cover page that we add to each council packet element. The cover page lists whether the item is being brought forward because of state legislation or is it strictly a local municipal matter. These are very clarifying items that mean that if you look at our council deliberations under the Honourable Mayor's leadership, they're very crisp and efficient meetings compared to, well, some of our neighbours.
Okay. And so coming back to the other question of how things get done. So part of it is, Bill, as mayor, you kind of decide the agenda, and the council talks about things, they make decisions, and then, Will, your job is to get those things done. You have employees under you who are over their respective departments. So, for example, Public Works, Planning.
And who are subject experts within their disciplines.
Correct. So you're kind of making sure that directives of the council take place, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Exactly.
So say someone just moved to Newberg. They work maybe in town, and they, have their little circle they run in, and maybe they don't really know anything about what's happening at the city level. And they would have no clue that 5 to 10 years ago, things were very different than they are now. So without getting too much into the weeds of the history, can you share some of the major things that have changed from 5 to 10 years ago to now? And Bill, sure, you go ahead and share.
Well, but to take a step back, when I first got elected, I didn't know what I didn't know either. And of course, and this, anybody who is thinking about running for mayor in the future, this could be something that will help you along. I assumed that I was going to come in and start making decisions, start ordering people around, start telling people what to do, and that's not the role of the city council. That is the city manager's role. And so there we go. Now, I'm sorry, I've forgotten the question.
How have things changed since 5 to 10 years ago? And I know one of the biggest changes has been in the city manager position. But I'd be curious, because I know Will is humble and he won't talk too much. You've been a citizen of Newberg for a long time, and you've seen how things were in the past, and you've seen how things are now. What are some of the biggest changes that you've seen?
Well, I mean, in that regard, the biggest change is stability. In the past, decisions were made for reasons other than what's best for the city of Newberg, and we don't need to go.
That's a good way of putting it.
But the job of the council is to represent the people and to make sure that we have the right people in place, the right support for the crew, so to speak, and that is the goal of the council, is to hire the right person and then empower them to do his or her job, him or her to do their job. Well,
yeah, I mean, I think that's true. I mean, but I think their stability began with their ethics reform, which occurred at the end of 2021. And by setting the table for good hiring and honest and ethical behavior, we've enabled department heads to be far more successful than when they were living in constant turmoil.
So you're absolutely right. But just the fact that we needed morals and what was the other term you used just a minute ago?
Ethics.
Indicates what the problem really was.
Yeah. And you two may not be allowed to share because of the certain agreements, but I, as a citizen, there's nothing to stop me from saying there were people who supposedly resigned that were, doing, illegal things to people within the ranks that, should honestly have gone to jail, that got away with, resigning, which is kind of maybe a moot point at this point. They're somewhere else probably causing trouble too.
I mean, you're kind of throwing out red meat there. So we probably ought to dig into that just a little bit. You're making assumptions from your experiences here. And yeah, sometimes in business and in government, the best option is to allow somebody to resign rather than to go through the process of firing them. So that may or may not have been true in the past. But again, the decision was made because that was the best course of action for the city.
Main thing is we needed them not there. And I understand. I just know that, legally you may not be able to say, based on the termination agreement. So I don't want to force you to say anything you can. Main point being that in 2019 or 2020, when you took over as interim, which year was it? You took over as interim?
Last year was 2021.
It was 2021.
Yes.
Okay. So that was...
It began very quickly.
Okay. And COVID is kind of all a blur, but you came in as the librarian.
In 2019.
In 2019. Oh, that's what I had. Okay. So you came in 2019 and you were an amazing library director. I don't want to twist that knife more than it already has been twisted over the years. But most people, I shouldn't say most, but many people don't know that you never wanted to be anything other than a library director. And you were an incredible library director. And some of the reorganizations you did and the organizational efficiency you had, where it was honestly, I would have no problem calling it genius level, the way that you reorganized the library in a week, maybe. I don't know. It was like a fraction of the time, because of the methodology you used.
It was Operation Poppins, the complete reorganization of nonfiction. That was accomplished in 4 hours.
4 hours. And normally that would have taken
Weeks. it was one of the best things we ever pulled off in the library.
And I think that could be, there could be books sold to libraries across the nation about how to do that. But my point being, you've taken that and then you were tapped on the shoulder to say, hey, will you be interim city manager? And you said, as long as I get to come back to library director. Yeah. And then bait and switch, they said, we need you to stay permanently. And the things that you've done, well, you mentioned on the ethical reform, because it wasn't the past city managers, there was a culture within the city, from outside perspective and, anecdotally or whatever, it seems like there was an unhealthy culture within the city.
There was an unhealthy culture.
And so,
in the city.
And so what I think taking that genius organizational mindset and with the Strive framework, I believe. So you made it that if there was a complaint, that someone would actually report to the second in command, not the first in command, so that there was a way to have the voice heard, correct?
So there would then be a way for department heads to come into the light quicker if they did something that was illegal or immoral. And they would be able, and it wouldn't matter if it was the city manager or the municipal judge, people who have real power. There would be a reporting mechanism so things wouldn't linger and get swept under the rug. But that same committee would also recognize people on the staff that were performing in a really high way for teamwork or integrity or their value for money, frankly, is one of our Strive values. So it had that dual function. Setting the framework for ethics first had to come before all the other things we did, and it's the bedrock.
Yeah. Some of the other things were SDCs. I know that was a big push to reform SDCs, which can you share briefly about that, how some of those changes, and have we seen that result in new decisions by developers and business owners? So first share the changes that were made to SDCs, and then if we've seen real changes to that.
Well, first of all, let me state that SDCs are systems development charges. And what they exist for is to pay for infrastructure that is going to be required because of new or added construction to town. So it's systems development charges are not, they're very clear on what their purpose is for. The money has to be used for that specific purpose. And that's one thing that Will and his team is very good at, is understanding, the law says this and we're going to do it this way.
So, for example, water system development charges, that money is saved in the fund for water infrastructure. It can't be used for roads or whatever.
Mm-hmm. But only new water infrastructure. For instance, we're going to be building a new water treatment plant soon, within the next, half dozen years?
Yes, we need to.
So the new plant, we're saving money for SDCs that are going to help fund it. We're also are saving money from the rates and so forth. So the citizens who live in Newberg today are going to be responsible for replacing the water treatment plant that we currently have.
Which is how old again?
It is almost 80 years old, yes.
80 years old, okay.
And the additional capacity that this plant is able to produce, because we do need a bigger plant, well, that's what the system development charges are there to pay for.
Exactly.
So that was one of the things I ran on, was reforming system development charges. There were some things that were very, very interesting. We took a very hard look at it, and again, under the direction of the inner city manager, Will Worthey, at that time. And we dug into these, and we found where we needed to make adjustments. And we had a general reduction of just under 10%, if I remember correctly.
Correct. And that came from taking a hard look at the projects in the system development charge table and removing ones, even if they were ones of far future value, they were unlikely to be buildable or built within 20 years.
Okay.
So that caused some projects to be removed.
Okay.
So there was an interesting wrinkle to all this. If you think back during COVID, there used to be a fitness center out by the airport. It was called XL Fitness. It had been here for quite a few years. I don't know how long, but it was more than just a few years. They started in McMinnville and then they expanded to Newberg. And during COVID, if you remember, they were shut down. They had no revenue whatsoever. So my understanding is the landlord came to them and said, hey, your lease is up for renewal. And the owners of XL told them, well, we don't have any business, so we really don't want to sign a new lease. And he said, oh, it's okay, but you got to move out. So they went around the corner to a warehouse on Winooski Street, and they found a building that was 5,000 square feet. It was slightly smaller, if I remember correctly, what they had, but it would be sufficient for what they had. So they went to the city council, they went to the planning department. They said, what's a building permit going to cost to remodel this building for us? And they did some calculations, said it would be $230,000. So the owner said, no, we're not building a building, we're just moving into one. And they said, oh, that's $230,000. He argued with them for quite a while. And eventually he closed his doors, moved out of his building, and now it had one location in McMinnville only. So when we sat down to reform the SDCs, we wanted to know, why this is. And they had what was called a change of use system development charge. And basically, if you were going to move into a building, the building before, it depended on what the use of the building was before and how much traffic it generated between, if I remember correctly, 4 and 5 p.m. Is that right? Well,
so it depended if it was the same sort of use before, in which case you got lucky, or if it was a very different use.
So for whatever reason, according to that chart, nobody has more business than a gym between 4 and 5 p.m. I don't necessarily agree with that, but that's what the manual said. So it created this extremely high figure for them. Another good example is the building that is now the
the animal shelter that has the cats in it. I can't remember the company.
Okay, the cat written down on First
Street. Okay.
Now, when I was young, that was a music store and had been for many, many years. And so a music store had a fairly low amount of traffic generated between 4 and 5. So anybody that came and wanted to lease that building and put any kind of retail shop it would generate an SDC of $75,000, $80,000, $100,000. Well, very few people can go into business on their first year, hand a check for $75,000, $80,000, $100,000 and expect to go. So all this SDC did was serve to run people off.
And it didn't actually collect any revenue for infrastructure of the city. So the transportation change of use SDC, as it's called, was just a bar to people opening up storefronts, which is why at that time in 2021, half of the units downtown were empty, but not today.
So we asked the question to the planner, who's no longer with us. She said, well, what are you going to do with this? We said, we want to eliminate it. And she said, no, we got to be careful. So I asked the question, how much money have we ever collected on this? She said, I will have to look it up and I'll let you know tomorrow. Well, tomorrow, she said, 0. Nobody had ever paid it. So we got rid of an onerous tax that now, as Will stated, is allowing our businesses downtown to be rented, leased, and it didn't cost the city a nickel because nobody had ever paid the tax. So that's the kind of thinking that government is good at.
And also the reform, right, also meant that a developer can know that our SDC tables are based on projects that are actually getting constructed. Mm-hmm. There's no fat in there.
Yeah. And then there were other changes too. So for example, childcare and then the size of projects too. Can you share a little bit about that?
Well, the main one there is the fact that for qualified, publicly licensable daycare, we removed all SDC charges. Now that is costing the city money potentially, but the fact is that's an economic accelerator for other kinds of business. And so we wanted to do that for the good of our whole economy.
Because for those listening who may not know, we are actually what's called the childcare desert, right? So there's the amount of people who need childcare to the childcare spots available is such that it actually keep people from moving and or working here because of the lack of childcare, right? So that's what led to that decision, correct?
So that reform means that people opening units like that would save anything between $80,000 and $200,000 of system development charges in order to enhance the rest in our economy.
And there have been, I know of at least 2 childcare facilities that have either opened or are planning to open. Do you know how many? Have you heard any more feedback as far as how many new childcare businesses there are?
The only one that took advantage of the eliminated SVCs is the one that is being built by ADAC, George Fox, and Northwest Christian Church on Northwest Christian Church's property. So they saved a good deal of money on the SDCs that they will not have to pay on that building.
Oh, because the one across from Miss Hannah's Popcorn, that's a childcare, but that was just change of use. Maybe that old white building.
Yeah, that was neither. That particular one, I think, if we look at it, is actually considered a home-based childcare center. So they're under an entirely different set of rules.
Okay.
Now, had they had built a new building or expanded the building, then they would have been eligible for the SEC credit.
So the one that is being built by ADAC, George Fox, and Northwest Christian Church, can you share a little bit about that project? 'Cause that's a really cool thing.
Well, my understanding is that that's going to be a 200-child unit, which is a huge injection of additional childcare. And that might not have been economically feasible without the SDC reform. One of the main things that the SDC reforms is there were some cynics in the community who said they didn't think that, how do you know any of this will work? And our response was, how do you know it won't work? Why don't we try something different that other cities haven't tried and see what comes of it?
It's because it's too easy to be a cynic.
So another, beside that, we realized that affordable housing is a real issue statewide for reasons beyond the control of the city. But we wanted to see if there was something we could do to help that. And what was determined is that House Bill 2001 allowed tiny homes, smaller homes, to be built on your residential lot, on anybody's residential lot. So the problem with trying to make a house affordable when you build a home is that a 3/4-inch water meter in the city of Newberg, if I remember correctly, the hookup fee is about $7,500.
Right. I don't remember the exact number, but yes.
And I may be wrong, but it's more than 5,500. It's a big number. Well, that's the same number for a 900 square foot house as it is for a 3,000 square foot house. So if our goal is to make a house cost less, that is a hindrance. So we looked at that and we said, well, we could solve that problem with SCC. So what we did was we decided to give a house under 1,000 square feet a 75% reduction on their system development charges. And to make it revenue neutral for the city, we also said that any house that's 2,500 square feet, I believe is the number, or over, will pay a 1.25 multiplier, which according to Deb Glardy, a very smart person that helped us run the program, said that would make it revenue neutral based on past.
And the thing about that is many tens of ADUs and small units have taken advantage of this in time. We also are working with the Polish Homes developers in the north part of town, and they're looking at, and this hasn't come to blueprint yet because it's in a future phase, but they're looking at getting attractive, small, very efficient, affordable units that can meet this goal. We've also had some discussions in whether we should raise the square footage to 1,200, but that would require a lot more math.
Yeah, that's, as a real estate agent, I'm very interested in affordable housing because I know many people, they have good working wages and
Careful, because that could be three entire new podcasts. Where do you want to go from here?
I'm sure it could. But it's something that is it's close to my heart because I know people who they work hard and they can't afford a home. They have good jobs, making $80,000 a year. And many times it's a mom who stays at home with the kids because that's what they want to do. Sometimes it's two people working, but often the people who have one salary, they make good money and they can't afford a home. And that to me is just, it's sad, and that's where we are. And granted, there's very few things I know at the city level that can be done. Part of that is a structural deficiency of how many homes have been built ever since 2010. A lot of
based on a structural deficiency of land,
right? Well,
by Oregon law,
which you're right. That would be another podcast. However, there are a lot of people who, if there was a supply of homes, that if they could have, a small backyard, all they need is really an apartment size, but a lot of people just want to own a home. And so if they could have a property that was not necessarily 100 years old, like many of the sub 1,000 square foot homes are, I think that would be a really cool thing. So I'm interested. It's interesting that you were talking about the ADU projects, and I would definitely be interested in seeing what Polish does. Hey everyone, quick break from the episode. The Giving Town podcast is brought to you by my real estate team, the Joyful Roberts Group. We're a family-run business located in Newberg, and we are passionate about serving and advising our clients at the highest level possible. Our goal is to serve you with excellence, get you the results you're looking for, and help you enjoy the process. If you've appreciated this podcast, the best way you can help us out is by introducing us to any of your friends and family who are thinking about buying or selling a home anywhere within 45 minutes of Newberg. All right, thanks for listening, and back to the show. Now, you mentioned Polish, and it's funny because on the different Facebook groups, people have their opinions, and Polish is actually a pretty decent home builder, but the way that
the city has had very good experiences with its interactions with that home builder.
Well, and the Austin family was very intentional of who they sold that land to. So all of that, the Collina subdivision is part of the Springbrook master plan. Mm-hmm. And they wanted to make sure they were going to choose a good home builder. The problem is, to many people, what's called a problem is they look at, the plat and they see drone footage and they say, oh my gosh, all those homes are just stacked on top of each other. So how much of that is a money grab from Polish Homes, and how much of that has to do with Oregon law requiring a certain amount of density in certain areas?
Interesting way to ask that question.
Because there's a lot of people who just think they're a greedy home builder.
Oh, okay. First of all, you're absolutely right. Polish Homes was picked because of standards put in place by Joanne Austin. And I didn't know Joanne Austin well, but what I do know about Joanne Austin is that she was a classy individual. And everything that she ever attached her name to that I know of was done first cabin. So her requirements for a builder to develop that property, and by the way, I would have disagreed with this as a builder. I would have preferred that local people in Newberg get to build homes on those properties. But it's her property. She had the right to do with what she wanted. So her requirement was that it be a quality builder. It had to be an Oregon based company. And there was another one it slips my mind right now. But as a contractor, Polish Homes is a very high quality, non-custom home builder. For somebody that builds spec homes, I was always impressed with the quality of what they did. And obviously the Austin industry, the Austin family felt the same way when they did that. So now back to your question, how much of the density is because of Polish Homes and how much of it is because of Oregon law? That property was master planned, 15 years ago, yep. 20 years ago, something along those lines. And a master plan is a very detailed plan that takes a lot of work, and you have to hire consultants. You have to work with the city to come up with a plan that is going to be what they build in the future. 15 years later, state laws had changed. The state now requires, that's probably fair, about 14.9 homes per acre. Our urban growth boundary in Newberg has not moved since it was created in 1978 or so, whatever time it was. The whole idea and the way that whole plan was sold to the citizens of Oregon, and we voted on it, we implemented this, was to control the growth of the city, not to stop the growth of the city.
All cities.
Yeah, all cities, correct, in the state of Oregon. And it was done to preserve farmland and therefore forest land too. Those were the original exception lands to what could be residential. But an interesting thing about that law is it required a 20-year supply of buildable land inside the urban growth boundary. And then around the urban growth boundary, there is also an urban growth reserve, which is supposed to have another 20-year supply. So the whole idea was that in time, approximately every 20 years, these boundaries would need to be expanded. The reality has, in Newberg, the urban growth reserve has never been expanded. The urban growth boundary is the same line in probably 80% of the city, and the city limits is the same line as far as that. So to comply with the law, what the government, and we can say Governor Kotek, because when she was the Speaker of House Bill 2001 was her bill. But from that time till now, the way that they've complied with that, rather than to move the boundary, expand the boundary, was to declare smaller and smaller lots. So when I was young, the average lot here in Newberg was about 1,500 square feet. Then it went to 10,000, and several years.
It was 15,000 square feet? Okay.
Yes. And then, approximately.
Yeah.
And then it went to 10,000. And then it kept getting smaller. And here before COVID, we were down to 4,500 square feet for an R1 lot, if I remember correctly.
Now, for people who think in acres, so 10,000 square feet is about a quarter of an acre. So
four houses per acre. So what the state's goals now for density is 14.9 homes per acre. So that would.
So the key thing about this is, now I'm a city kid. I grew up in a city, right? So you don't expect you expect denser numbers when you're dealing with an urban built environment. But it feels to me, as a person that didn't grow up in Oregon, that we have a strange conundrum here. We have an urban growth boundary which can never be shifted because the regulations have shifted and density has increased. Density goals of the state have increased. And so we can never seem to get to the original conception of the UGB, which is that cities would steadily grow over time, steadily in a controlled way. That doesn't happen. And whenever you make anything scarce, you make it expensive.
Right.
So in your business, you have people who buy in different price ranges. Some people, have very high employment and they want a nice home. So if you wanted $1 million home around Newberg, it's not likely to be inside the city limits.
Very few are.
So what has happened, the law that was created to preserve farmland, and I grew up just outside the city of Newberg. I lived here since 1962. The houses that we lived on a 10-acre farm that was surrounded by Century Farms, by the Shaw family. Well, since the 70s, between the 70s and now, almost all those farms have been sold, and they were divided into 5 and 10-acre hobby farms, which has been very good for the wine industry because that's a nice size for a beginning vineyard. But what has happened is anybody that has enough money to buy wherever they can afford to live buys out in the city, out in the county where they can get a 5 or 10 or maybe even a 3-acre piece of property with a big home on it all by itself. And the rest of us have to live in Newberg or inside the city limits on smaller and smaller lots. The worst thing for the citizens, and I'm sure you're aware of this in your industry, is neighborhoods are not going to have their character anymore. If you live in the Greens right now, which is inside the city limits, and your neighbor's house burned down, what the law currently says is any place that it's legal to build a single-family residence, it's also illegal to build a duplex, a triplex, a quad, a cottage cluster, which is 8 units, or even a high-density residence. And if the people who live in the greens and have the homeowners association think that's going to protect them, they're absolutely wrong. The state law is going to trump it. So I've been trying to tell people about this ever since I've had a voice. And when people are going to hear it is when something happens, like in Albany right now, where there's that is exactly that exact thing happening, is they're putting some high density projects inside of a neighborhood and everybody's up in arms about it.
It kind of happened on Crater Lane over in the foothills area. You had all those little cottages built. It's a little different maybe, but.
So, I believe in a range of different housing price points and sizes for different stages of life, but I don't believe a city's destiny should be artificially constrained by an urban high density target number.
Yeah, so basically when there's a master plan like Collina was, in order for that to get approved, that average of the whole has to be 14.9 homes per acre. Is that
actually a planned unit development, PUD.
Okay.
Is what that might have been. I'm not sure. I think it was. That's outside of the current laws. And yes, they are going to be encouraged, if not required, to have that kind of density. But see, what happened is all that land that Polished Homes is currently building on. When they made that master plan, land cost was worth a certain amount of money. Well, because of this artificial shortage that we've created by not allowing the city to grow, land has gotten more and more expensive. So for them to be able to develop, they had to bring in more density so that they could pay the cost that the land was worth at today's market base. Does that make sense?
Sure. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So you could almost imagine a sort of an urban force field moving out from larger cities, engulfing their neighboring communities. Mm-hmm. And that line is a rise in house prices.
Yeah.
As scarcity sets in.
Yeah.
So when I was in high school and this law was implemented in the late 70s, the way that it was touted by Thousand Friends and, well, actually, but anyway, this was going to be so great that every state in the nation was going to want to adopt our rules.
How many have?
None. Zero.
Yeah. Wow. Well, I guess we can only do what we can do. And part of that, I guess, is, at least at a local structure, making it, more incentivized for smaller structures and maybe building things that people can live in. One interesting project, I'm curious how much you guys know about it, the Hive project on College Street, where there's going to be that little cluster. I don't really know a whole lot about it other than I looked it up, and it seems like there's going to be a little tiny home type cottage. Do you know what that's going to be?
Some of them are going to be quite large, or quite large. They're going to be from, I think there's one or two that are going to be under 1,000, but most of them are going to be in the 1,500 square foot range.
Yeah, I saw some floor plans that was 14 something.
Yeah.
Okay. A couple of them. The novelty there is the idea of using alternative construction methods. So it's kind of attacking the problem from a different direction than from the land value direction. Having pre-built parts that can be bolted or welded together to make houses rather than building them in a bespoke way. And I think that's hopefully one of the approaches that, Bill would know more about house construction.
Well, they're trying to build modular homes to some extent, or offsite. If you think back to, of course, none of us are old enough to remember, but in World War II, we needed to build a bunch of ships, and we needed to build them fast. And they were, the way that they built ships at the time was that they would start setting a hull, and then they would continue to build a ship all in one place. Well, they got Mr. Ford to come down and take a look at that. He couldn't believe what they were doing. So what he convinced them that they needed to do was build the various components of the ships off-site and then bring them to this site to assemble them all in a relatively short period of time. So that's what these folks are trying to do.
Okay.
And if you've been to the airport recently, then you've seen examples of two of the different suppliers. One is Mods. It's mass plywood panels. It's if you think about a piece of plywood, it's normally what, a 1/2 or 3/4 inch thick. Mm-hmm. So they can make them up to, I believe, 24 inches thick.
Interesting. Okay.
And they can make various components. They're beams, basically. They make beams out of plywood. So it's inexpensive wood. It's it's wood that inexpensive. It is not premium stuff. It's what they would normally make plywood out of. And then the other one is also that you would see at the airport is called cross-laminated timber. And that comes from Scandinavia. And basically it's, if you think about taking 2x4s and putting them together like plywood, put them in layers, cross-hatch, and then one lengthwise. That's basically what they're doing. And it's kind of the same thing.
Okay. Well, yeah, we definitely could have probably a whole other podcast about just housing. But one thing actually I did want to mention with that, there's a new, is it Spark? I totally forgot the acronym. But it's a program for people. Essentially, they can apply for it. Can you talk about that program specifically for affordable housing? And we can move on to the next topic.
Yeah, that's all right. Spark. It stands for Supporting People Achieving Resilience Through Knowledge. And so it's a supported housing entity. If you think about during COVID, we started talking about...
Don't like thinking about during COVID, but I will for you, Bill.
But we try to move people off the streets and into housing. And the common thought at the time was that you could take somebody off the street, pull them out of their tent, put them into a house, and that they would thrive. And the reality is that this didn't happen. There's too many things that they need to learn. So Hayden Homes came up with a housing ladder, and basically it's 8 steps to take somebody from being homeless, living on the streets, to finally getting them into a house. And if you think about Habitat for Humanity, they're at like step 4 or 5. Where they're taking somebody that actually has a job, not necessarily is fully employed, but it has, understand how to make money. And they find a way to put them into a house, which they have some ownership over. They don't actually own they own the structure. They don't own the land. And, when they sell the structure, they have to sell it back to Habitat so that they can continue to do it. Great program. But Spark is at the 7 to 8 level. Spark is for the person you alluded to earlier that says, I make a good income. 80% of the area median income is about $86,000 a year, I believe. So my family forum has an income of $86,000, but Bill, I cannot afford to buy a house. And so what Spark is going to do is allow those people voluntarily to move into a structure that's going to look like an apartment building. And while they're in there, they're going to be able to make some serious changes to their lifestyle so that the goal is that they can own a house at the end of this time period. So it's a 4-year maximum time period. They don't have to live there all 4. If they graduate early, they're welcome to do that. But they can stay there up to 4 years. And during that time, they're going to take courses that they need to help them to get. The first one would be financial course. Think of a Dave Ramsey type course. We're gonna budget. We're gonna figure out how much money you got in, and then we're gonna see where it goes, and we're gonna see if it's going to the right places. Somebody in that position might have some credit challenges. Well, in 4 years, we have time to work on credit challenges, so they will have credit counseling. It could be that they, part of the reason some of us can't afford a house is because we drive 2 expensive automobiles. I was in a dealership yesterday at a tiny pickup, an F-150 is $50,000 to $60,000 now. So if you and your wife both have one, you've probably got payments of over lots.
I drive an entry-level Honda, by the way.
I guarantee mine's more entry-level than yours.
So it may be that, then in their education, they're going to learn that they need to set their priorities.
Right.
Because once you get into a house, and you as a real estate agent, I know can appreciate this. Once you finally buy that house, your budget is going to be tight for the next year. And hopefully sometime in a year or 5. Yeah. So, but hopefully you're going to get a raise.
Yeah.
And then, there may be some other things happening. 5 or 6 years after you're into that house, that payment is now low compared to what new houses, compared to what the rental market is even. So now that you're comfortable in your house, now you can go buy that truck. You have the money. Of course, you may have changed your thinking and your priorities to where you may not want to buy that brand new truck anymore, but that's the whole plan.
Yeah.
So once the person, we're also going to do job, counseling, through business, I better not say that. I'm going to get it wrong. But we're going to offer a job counseling. Maybe you're working at Fred Meyer as a clerk. Nothing wrong with that. But you really want to be a welder, and there's welding courses out there, or there's jobs for welders. But unfortunately, because you're raising your family, you can't afford to take time off work to go get that training to do that. So Spark hopes to find ways to provide that training, and maybe even find ways to get it paid for. I don't want to say too much. We have a lot of things working.
Yeah. So I guess the bottom line is it helps people get into a situation. And if at the end of that 4 years, the amount they pay in their housing, does that from a down payment? Is that
what? Yes. Well, what we plan to do is, we want to return upon successful completion some of the rent that they paid, some of the fees that they paid. We don't call it rent. It's not going to be a tenant agency, but some of the fees we're going to be able to refund, or I should say, grant to the recipient for one specific purpose, and that it will be to use a down payment for a house. And it's not going to have to be the day after you move out. We're going to give them like 5 years to find that house. So, I know people want to look at all the reasons that this won't work, and we're doing the same thing. We're trying to find all the problems and make sure that we allow this, have the right solution. The whole idea is that, you have an agent working with you and he can't afford to buy a house for various reasons. We want to come along beside that agent and over the next 4 years get him into a position where he can be a property owner in the city of Newberg.
Like a home buyer to be.
Yeah.
Okay.
And imagine that we have people who want smaller homes. Well, in 4 years, we have an opportunity to actually talk to some of the builders out there and make sure that, we can help to find the right product for that person or family when they come out.
Yeah. So what stage is this in now? Because I imagine a facility has to be built first, or these houses?
Yeah. Full disclosure, I'm the president of that board, and the other two officers are Brad Naffin from Austin Industries and Doug Kane from Providence Foundation.
Okay.
There's 10 of us who are on the board.
Okay.
You know every one of them. These are people who are very successful in our community, who are passionate about this, and we're trying to design this. So we're currently in what we're calling the quiet phase.
Okay.
What we're doing right now is seeking grants.
Okay.
Because what we intend to do is get that building built and paid for and that's what's going to allow us to have money left over to grant back to the participant.
Gotcha. Okay. So we're at least a few years out from this actually being a reality where people can enter the program and start moving in. Is that?
I would like to think that we're within 2 years of start construction.
Okay. Well, maybe we can do one of these again, and I guess depending on if you're mayor, if there's another mayor, but you'll still be a part of it, and would like to update this because this is a really cool project, and I appreciate you guys.
Since you brought it up, I should mention, and I do intend to run for mayor again this November. So,
and I will stop it there because I have to keep this non-political. No, people will be aware of that for sure. All right, let's move on. A couple of kind of other items that people have talked about, and this may be a longer podcast, but I think it's worth it because there's good things to talk about. So. It's just funny. People get so up in arms about this. The new traffic cameras were just installed. This was something that had started a while ago. And just to recap, my understanding is that the previous cameras, that whoever is managing them, they weren't able to send the proper files to the city so that they took pictures, but that
is correct. The previous firm, and I will choose not to say their name, the previous firm was unable to successfully transfer the data packets using a very standard XML format. And we got frustrated with them. We were given many chances to fix that, and they were unable to, and then the contract was terminated, which meant we had to start all over again from scratch.
So now we have new cameras. Long story short, they work.
They're working great.
Great.
I'm visibly seeing safer driving behaviour through that section of our town, and the awareness that once you have these sorts of cameras in a town, people become cognizant of it, and it has a spillover effect that causes safer driving behaviours. And so we're trying to calm down people as they're going through our densely crowded downtown area.
Where are they? Why don't we tell the people where they are?
Oh, sure. So yeah, 99 in Villa.
Yep.
And then...
And there'll be another array of cameras on 99 in Main.
Now, these areas were chosen because there was actually research done to see where most crashes happen,
yes.
Right?
And we had to justify what we knew anecdotally. We had to justify it scientifically to ODOT in order to be given the licenses, because it's ODOT right of way.
So some people get up in arms and they get mad that cities are bringing in revenue, which is silly to me because...
Police officers aren't free.
Yeah. But the other thing is, someone posted a comment about this and I love it. They said it's a voluntary tax. If you don't want to pay the tax, don't run a red light and don't go 15 miles an hour. Don't go 50 miles an hour in a 35 zone. It's actually quite simple.
Yeah, it's actually very simple for your listeners. Don't speed.
Yeah.
Don't endanger the lives of kids and families with reckless driving, and you'll never pay one of these tickets.
Yeah.
Just that you are already not paying them from being pulled over in the conventional manner.
So how much revenue is this actually likely going to bring in for this? Are we seeing, because we've already started to see some of these tickets come in, right?
Yeah, I mean, I actually don't know. It's too early days to know.
Okay.
What the revenue is going to be. But regardless of that, it's a good thing for the city to do.
Yeah.
I expect we'll bring in some revenue. I'm sure it'll be north of $100,000 a year. It will not be a budget boosting large line item in the city's budget the way that gasoline pass-through taxes or some other things are that are useful for the city's operations.
Mm-hmm.
But at the end of the day, we're a very, very lean city with very lean numbers of staff. We have a balanced budget in the 4-year horizon. So if anyone thinks that would like to know more about that, that's the key thing.
Well, and moving to the next topic, you had a major focus on debt reduction, which I don't know enough about other city governments, but that seems like a fairly unique and, I guess, fiscally responsible position that many people are just looking at the next shiny thing that they can get debt for.
Like, for example, some cities would choose to build a extravagant multicolored bridge. So I don't think Newberg would build a bridge like that.
I think that's a wonderful looking bridge. I'm sure those neighboring cities would. Anyway, let's just not get into that. But anyway, there's a focus on debt reduction. Why is that so important?
Because if your city's has a carrying cost of a lot of debt, then that adds on to the rates that people pay directly. So in particular, we have one of our rates, which is the wastewater rate, and 20% of that bill is made of debt. And so the city should strive to try to build its infrastructure projects without adding to debt. And when the city can retire its debt early, it can have a beneficial effect for everybody's pocketbook. Mm-hmm. And specifically, having been embarked upon debt reduction for several years, we actually are now about to pay off one of our loans early in June, and that will create enough financial bandwidth to remove a line item from the billing statement that the residents are holding in their hands every month, which is the communications line item. That item will be removed in June, said no other city in Oregon.
Nice. So is that from the water bill, one of those items that's on
Correct.
That? Okay.
And so we were able to create a delta by paying off the debt early that went along with our communications tower expansion.
Okay.
Now, this shows folks what you can do if you can get your debt under control. And if it is the will of council, the next thing we should embark upon is to try to pay off our wastewater debt early as well. And that could have a positive effect, or it would have a positive effect on that particular rate, the wastewater rate. So don't do fancy things. Don't build fancy things. Live within your means. Try to control your staffing. Try to pay off your debt, kind of like a sensible homeowner would.
So this was an interesting topic. When I was running, this was one of my three things that I was going to help to change, and that's removing those items from the water bill. And maybe we should talk about how they get there. The city can raise taxes, I should say can raise revenue, only a few ways. A bond or what is the other word I'm trying to think of?
Well, there's a small property tax increase that we can do.
Yeah.
Which is...
But a bond or a tax levy has to be voted on by the people. So that's inconvenient for city staff to have to go through an election to justify to the citizen why they should raise. So by raising fees is the easiest way for a city to raise taxes. And over the years, that's how those three items got on our water bill. Now, they're only a few bucks a month, but that represents a big debt. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, and I mean, the one thing people complain about as far as utilities more than anything is the water bill being so high. Mm-hmm.
And when people complain about that, they fundamentally don't understand the tax landscape of the United States.
Mm-hmm.
So in other states, there is much lower utility bills and massively higher property taxes.
Yeah.
We have a regulation framework put in place by the voters of Oregon that caps our property taxes through Measure 5 and Measure 50. We're only able to do a regular tax increase of 3% for property taxes. Our property taxes are much lower than many states elsewhere in the Union. So therefore, things still have to be paid for.
Yeah.
And the way cities in Oregon have dealt with this is to have higher rates fees. Same money.
Yeah. And if you had higher property taxes, you'd have an even worse affordability crisis as far as affording homes, at least as far as I see it. But
that's true. Like in New Jersey, the same house size here, 1,800 square feet might have an $8,000 a year property tax bill. That's something folks should think about.
Yeah.
When they're looking at their municipal billing statement, they should ask their cousins back east to share their property tax statement, and then they should have a think about that.
One of the other things, moving forward, you recently signed a new contract with the city. You know, there's a lot of back and forth with that. Can you explain the importance of that? And Bill, actually, I'll have you go first. Why is it important to have, how many years is the?
8 years.
8 years. Why is it important to have a long-term contract with the city manager?
Well, anybody who is employed by elected officials has the possibility of an entirely different group of people coming in every 4 years. And so when this council took over 3 years ago plus, Will had a very short-term contract. 1 year?
Yeah, it was very limited.
Okay. And Will has shown us over that period of time that he is the right person for this job. I mean, there's no doubt that we are very fortunate to have Will Worthey here as our city manager. So it was only right to give him job stability. Now, it is in fact an 8-year contract, but the truth is we can pay him off 12 months salary and he's done. We could fire him tomorrow, but he's going to get paid for the next 12 months. And you have to understand that for somebody like a city manager to change jobs, he's got to uproot his family from the city of Newberg and go to wherever his new job is. First, he has to find a new job. So, and then once that happens, then he has to sell his house and move to it. So it's important for somebody like Will to have that stability, knowing that he's got 12 months to make that change when the time comes.
Yeah.
I think that's a good summary of the situation. There is the likelihood, if I were not the city manager of Newberg, would be I would go and do something different.
Like sweet talk Corey into allowing you to become library director.
I would probably still have to move somewhere else to a library director somewhere, right? But the risks get greater with age. And it seemed fair that if I was prepared to commit the rest of my working career to the city, that we would have the mutual respect to set up in that manner. I think I and my team have proved ourselves to be very effective. We've done all of the things we said we would do. Every single thing we said we would do, we've done. Once again, what city in Oregon can you name that can show you all of this internal reforms and its first debt reduction wave completed without adding any new debt or any new fees during 5 years?
I'm guessing there's a short list and there might only be one on it. I don't know. But yeah, I mean, it's clear to me and everyone who knows you that you've been one of the best things that's happened to Newberg in a long time, which makes people want to work at Newberg again and makes there become a healthy culture, and, it makes staffing better. And yeah, I think it's good leadership has been a great thing. So having stability for the city as well, to know that we have a good leader in place, we have a good direction we're going. And most of the city council members, I would think, they may come in, like you said, think you're going to come in, you're going to tell people how things go, really realize, oh, this is how things work. Here's the plan, and there are different decisions that are made, but most of the time, the main structure of how the city works is, I'd imagine, going to stay fairly similar.
Yes, but let me add a little caveat to that. It's important for a city manager as an ethical public servant to obey the will of council and to not bring their own ideology or their own ideas into the mix. If strategic vision shifts, it is the ethical thing for the city manager and the department heads to shift to match the will of the elected people.
Okay.
That's our form of government. That's democracy.
Yeah. Which is probably one of the hardest things, to enforce the will that you completely disagree with. But that is, you are nothing if not
Well, the council can help
ethical
by
person.
setting clear, obtainable goals.
Yeah.
And that's something that we've done twice, the first year and the third year. We set 2 years worth of goals, and the next council will have the opportunity to set their own. But yes, they're very clear, concise, and actionable.
Extremely actionable. We have been very blessed by having our council provide us with a blueprint that can be executed.
Good. I know we are getting short on time. One of the other things, actually even had a neighbor ask me about this. Actually, the next one. The first one is River Street project. So, and actually paving in general, the street maintenance. There's a whole, and I'll just say this, there's a whole schedule you can go on Newberg's city website and you can look at. People will say, why are you paving streets that don't need to be paved? Obviously, that's not true. You have a whole metric, right? It's very intentional.
Yeah, but it's beyond intentional. We actually just scanned the entire city with LiDAR, with a laser, surface reflective laser. We know exactly which streets have failing condition. Those are the streets that we're focusing on. Council direction is to focus on southern districts for the actual expensive treatment, which is grind and inlay. And as you say, we have a policy for how we pick the streets. And that decision point is based upon road condition, which we now have uploaded to our GIS, our mapping system. Mm-hmm. I can tell you the road condition of any street section in Newberg within 5 minutes of being asked, because the data thanks to our brilliant mapping guy, Alan McKeel, who has updated all of that information into our map.
So the one of those items that we talked about on the water bill is called a TUF, the traffic utility fee. And one of the easiest places for a city council or city staff to find money is by deferring road maintenance. In Portland, that started with Vera Katz. And you could now see, 30, 40 years later, how bad the streets are in Portland because nobody's ever picked the ball and continued to do that. For your example earlier, somebody said that we're paving streets that don't need to be paved. Well, they're probably mistaken because we're trying to preserve pavement. So when you have a street that is several years old and is starting to show a little bit of wear, then the best thing to do is to seal coat it. Because what tears the street up is for water to seep down through the pavement in the wet years. And then in the wintertime, we get a little bit of freeze, which heaves that ice and breaks the brittle asphalt. So one of the first things that we do with a fairly good street that's in good condition is we can seal coat it. And then the next step, why don't you tell, Will?
Yeah. So there are multiple street processes happening every summer now. If it's a street that we're just trying to preserve, and maybe it's only show a small amount of cracks, we can do crack sealing. If we want to do more profound seal coat, we would do a cape seal, which would have chips, little bits of rock in it. But that's also a sealing thing that just preserves the wear surface of the road, makes it last longer. If the road's already starting to fail and it has a lower score for Pavement Condition Index or PCI, then our next tool would be to do grind and inlay, which is where we remove a couple of inches of the surface. And you've seen many sections in the Southern District in the last 2 years. They're all on the website, which we intervened before the street could become rubble. Beyond that, you're talking about rebuilding the street. That quadruples the cost per 1,000 square feet.
And is that what's happening with River Street?
River Street is already failed. So River Street
I like to call it River Rodeo.
Yes.
Well, River Street has been known to be in bad shape for quite a few years now, as every resident in town knows. But it's also a street that in the future Newberg is going to have an entirely new importance because it's going to be the connector to the riverfront district, which will be developed over the future. So when we did the urban renewal district, we all agreed that the very first project is going to be fixing that street. So our city manager is making sure that all the pipes that need to be run under that street in the next 10 or 15 years are getting run now. He's actually got a couple. He's going to put conduits or sleeves through so that he could actually stick a pipe in later without digging up street. Because as you know, 9 times out of 10, when a city builds a new street, within a few months, somebody's digging holes in it to repairing the concrete. So we're trying to make sure that doesn't happen now.
We've even done ground penetrating radar of the whole length of the road already to get intel on what the below grade conditions are so we can do a smarter design.
Nice. But it's going to be a total rebuild. Think Elliott Road,
right,
going down to the high school. That's the sort of project that River Street is going to be.
Which is somewhere in the neighborhood of what, 10 million?
Actually, I've got some positive news for your listeners.
Okay.
We've got pre-design steps have just finished and they've completed last week. We're looking at 3 possible cross sections. If the community and council go for the most affordable of those options, it looks like it could well be less than $8 million.
Okay.
And that's not what I thought a year ago. I thought it was going to be 10 million.
Okay. That's good.
Now let me ask you a question. In your world, did you ever think that you would hear somebody say only $8 million and you would shake your head like you just did about in agreement?
I doubt it. I was also, until more recently, naive of just what things cost. If you had asked me, like, how much would it cost, I probably would have guessed, like, probably at least a couple million. That's kind of where, but inflation happened everywhere. So the next question is like you mentioned, the River Street is going to be the main connector to the Riverfront District, and there's the Riverfront Master Plan, which people can look up. The Riverfront Master Plan looks amazing. It shows all these kinds of amazing walkways and things by the river. But ultimately, it all, as far as I understand, has to do with whoever buys the old mill site. Is that right? Because they have to be a participant in that, right?
The mill site purchase will both provide revenue to accelerate the newer plan. It will also shape what has to happen with their frontage improvements that connect to the truck route as well as River Street. So yes, the purchase of that and how that goes down is the first step to that Riverfront Master Plan becoming a reality.
Now let me help you understand how important the mill site is to this project. Do you understand tax increment financing?
No, I don't.
The Urban Renewal District is tax increment financing. So basically what we did was 3 years ago, we froze the level of income taxes that come in to that from that district. So any raises, and as you just said, every year we get inflation, any raises in that district to the taxes are going to create the fund that we have to build the Urban Renewal District. So if you had a house, now let's say that, you had a house in that was worth $100,000, and every year it goes up by 10%, it's slowly increasing. Well, here's the deal with the mill property. The mill property was in the county prior to the Urban Renewal District. When it was a mill, it was a county tax item. When it came to the city and became part of the Urban Renewal District, it is raw land. So it's taxed as raw land today. So every bit of construction that goes on that raw land is going to increase the taxes by the total amount of the construction.
Okay.
So if somebody goes in there and spends $100 billion or $100 million to build a factory, and I'm not saying that's going to happen, but wouldn't that be nice? That tax base from that $100 million would all go to the Urban Renewal District, and therefore giving the city the revenue to build some roads, and maybe even build some amenities that you've seen in that plan.
Yeah. So with that project, I mean, how many years has it been since CDC bought that property?
Oh, geez.
And many years.
Before Will.
Yeah. It was just before, I mean, that would be 6 years or something.
So they bought it, they tore it down, they cleaned it up, and it's just been sitting there.
But
It was before COVID.
although this piece of land, right, is the accelerant that will cause the riverfront plan to explode financially, the reality is it's still private property. They have the right to market it and sell it at a price point that they find to be reasonable. And so the city has no capability to change market forces. Mm-hmm. So it's funny, our destiny, all of our destinies as residents is tied up with those CDC decisions through their realtor.
Maybe we could all write them some letters and say, can you please? Because I mean, I've talked to several companies who they've tried to buy it, but they just, the price is not, and I don't know how much the city or how much you know, or maybe you're not allowed to say things, but I mean, it seems like, is there any hope for that selling at some
this
point?
Is your area of expertise.
Well, I'm residential and this is commercial, so it's a bit outside.
But here's a positive thing.
Because I will reduce the price, or highly encourage my sellers to reduce the price if it hasn't sold it.
They do have a new realtor, a new commercial realtor, and this emerged only a couple of months ago.
Okay.
That particular agent is willing to talk to the city. The previous one was not.
That's a positive.
That's a positive. And if anyone is involved, listening to this, involved in industry, or knows someone who is, and they would like to have that person's contact information, the city will be more than delighted to share those points of contact.
Okay. Maybe I should call them and have them do the podcast.
The important thing for your listeners to know is the city has no effect other than the zoning of what's going to go on in that building.
Right.
We have, we can't facilitate it. There's no way we can bring in somebody. Right. We can reach out to people, but it's up to them to take all this.
Yeah.
Even though we know it's the fuse to light the riverfront.
They're holding the matches.
they're holding the match. Use the metaphor.
Well, no, that's good to know. And it'll be, so once they purchase the property, are there things that they will, like right now it's a huge blackberry grove, which is great blackberry picking, except it's all fenced in, and so it's all for the birds, I guess.
There'll be 16 or 20-inch water lines. One imagines there'll be sewer lines will go in, but the configuration of that infrastructure, an industrial road or sidewalks, will depend upon the needs and the uses of the industry that goes in there. We will be a good partner to the mill site when it starts getting sold. You better believe it. Yeah. Because this is strictly to the interests of every man, woman, and child in our town.
Absolutely. Well, I just hope it's not just a data center that hires 10 people. And
it's not what?
I just hope it's not a data center that just only hires 10 people. And
it's unlike...
Well, I mean, that was my initial thought, was we don't need a data center. But imagine that we did get a small data center. And by the way, it would never be a big one. We don't have the power supply to handle a big, huge data center. And that's apparently is a barrier we can't change. But if we did get a small data center in there, that would create some construction jobs. And the few jobs that they do create would be, professional level jobs that would pay a living wage or a generous wage. But it would also not add a great deal of need to the infrastructure. So therefore it would leave a large piece of property for something that's, more intensive, for infrastructure would be. So it's, I agree with you on principle, but please don't,
sure. But anything's better than what it is right now.
Anything that would be a viable industrial project would generate tax increment financing, which would accelerate the rest of the Newberg plan.
That's true. I'll rescind my comment. If you're listening to this and you want to build a data center, and so be it.
Well, if you pay since you're going there, it's also has a enterprise zone overlay. What other incentives?
There's some huge advantages to the mill site. So the mill site has virtually an unlimited supply of recycled water. So if you need water for industrial cooling, it has there. It has that. It has good access into our interstate network to do long hauling. It is a wide open site. There is a decent electricity supply. It's not vast. I can't remember the kilowatts off the top of my head, but it has all of those other features that would make it an attractive site. And 100 acres contiguous, if you wanted it, that's not bad. So close to cities.
Now, something that could happen this summer, you see the construction go down there on the highway, 219. Winooski Road is going to be rerouted. It's going to, before it gets to the highway, turn south, and it's going to enter Highway 219 at Wilsonville Road. And they're going to put a traffic light in that area.
Okay.
Or on that intersection.
Okay.
And the whole reason for rerouting it down to that is to have proper separation between those two traffic lights. That's going to be a great change for Newberg, because right now you can't hardly turn out on to the road at time of day from either Wilsonville or Winooski.
Yeah, that'll definitely be good. What are some of the main things that maybe we didn't discuss? Just things that Newberg citizens should be aware of. I know we covered actually quite a bit. Anything else that you feel like is pressing?
I guess I would say you have to recall that we've managed all of this internal efficiency work while still maintaining a small but fully staffed team. So in other words, we're not luxuriously staffed by any means, but we managed to attract enough talent to stay fully staffed. They have to remember that we're the 6th safest community in Oregon, despite being a fairly large town by Oregon standards.
We're 6th now? Okay, good. I'm glad I have that number. Thank you.
So we are punching well above our weight for efficiency, for safety, for responsiveness. We always reach back out to residents the moment they reach out to us, continuously and always. I don't think that is true for many of our competitors. And so it's a good place to live, it's a good place to grow.
Especially when you consider the safety to price ratio. Many of the other areas around like Westland and Lake Oswego and some of the other areas that are maybe higher on that list are much more expensive. So
keep that quiet. Some of the department heads might hear that and take advantage. We have, in my opinion, the best public safety department in the state of Oregon, and probably much larger area than that.
I concur.
Part of the problems that the city had prior to Will being city manager was the upheaval that included the police chief, and it was through no fault of his own. They got caught up in the whole city manager debacle.
Yeah,
we are very, very lucky to have Jeff Kosmicki.
He's great
as our chief, and he's training up 2 captains. Either one of them, when he's ready to go, are going to be able to replace him and continue the kind of service we have. I get at least monthly emails from people thanking us for some action that the police department take, usually involving conflict resolution rather than escalation.
They're good at that. I very much appreciate that.
It's thoughtful, measured, good old-fashioned community policing. It's not reactive. Many of our officers are very senior, and many of them have chosen to keep staying with us beyond the age when normally officers would choose to retire. Officers often retire young. We like them like that. It gives us a great mixture of seasoned experience and wisdom.
Yeah. Last question. Oh, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, so the other thing that you probably should talk about is fiscal responsibility. This council is the most conservative council that we've had in quite a while.
Are you talking about politically or conservatively?
No, I'm
or financially?
Financially conservative. This council, to a person, believes in spending money where it needs to be spent, which is water, sewer, lights, streets, public safety. We don't have money coming to us to be using for other things, social programs and so forth, and therefore we don't spend money outside those areas. I have learned something about myself, and that is, it is much harder for me to spend your money than it is for me to spend mine. I can go to the store and justify why I spend extra money for something that I'm buying for myself with my own money. Last month, we made a trip to Washington, D.C. to lobby for the bypass to be done. And several of the people who went took a direct flight out of Alaska that took them straight to Washington, D.C. That flight was over $100 more than the one with a stop. So I had to choose the one that had stopover in Chicago, both directions, to go there. And I do it because it is the right thing to do. And we are thankful that our city manager feels the same way about spending money.
I feel exactly the same way, and I really respect Bill for having that ethos. It's not our money, and you won't see any fancy projects in Newberg. You're only going to see things that we need to build that are common sense projects. No flashing lights.
Last question for each of you. What gives you hope for the future of Newberg?
I think that the mill site itself is a seed. It's a down payment on the future when that develops. I'm hopeful about the wonderful layout that will create, starting with the River Street project. So that gives me a lot of hope that we're going to see something really special happen there.
I share that belief as well, but for me, I've lived in this town since 1962 or 3 or something, and I love this town. And when I grew up here, it was a much different place. There was more room between things. There were things that young people could do and not get in trouble. But we were a community, and I would like to believe that our leadership, Will's leadership, has fostered that community spirit. We're trying to do things to be a community rather than just a city. And in my opinion, I think we're doing good. And that is my hope. Wouldn't it be nice if we could all just get along, I guess is the cheesy way to say it. But I would like to see us put community first in a lot of things, a lot of ways, most everything that we do.
Awesome. Well, thank you both. I appreciate it. You may have tied the record or beat the record for the longest podcast, but I think it was good. It was all good stuff, and I appreciate you both. Appreciate your leadership here. And, it's not always easy. And then a lot of times it can be thankless, and I'm sure you're often misunderstood or misrepresented in what you do, but I appreciate, that each of you are doing what you can and working to do the right thing for the city. So appreciate you both. Thanks for being here, and thanks for sharing today.
Thank you very much.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Giving Town podcast. Our mission with this podcast is to provide hope and inspiration to our community by sharing the stories of the amazing leaders here. This podcast is brought to you by my real estate team, the Joyful Roberts Group. And whether you're looking to buy or sell your home anywhere around Newberg and beyond, we would love to serve you. Also, don't forget to subscribe to our newsletter with the link in the show notes, and I'll catch you in the next episode.